A lot of times on the weekends we're really busy, so I take Mondays to kind of reset. On Saturday, we're running around doing a lot of things and going shopping and grocery shopping and things like that. And so Sunday we go to church and then we like to rest. And Monday everybody is back to their regular schedules and their regular routine. And so I like to kind of do what I call a Monday reset. So here I am preparing a double loaf of sourdough bread to put in the refrigerator and bake up whenever we need it this week. I try to do this every Monday, and this is a half whole wheat and half regular bread flour sourdough. So I actually ground this myself in my grain mill, and this is einkorn flour. So one of these I've already baked up, and I like to just have a piece of it toasted with butter. And then the other one, I believe I'm going to take the other one and maybe make into dinner rolls for a soup that we're going to have. So you could just see me preparing these 2 loaves of bread. I'm weighing out and measuring everything, and I will add the salt here after a while and do my stretch and folds throughout the day, put them both in the bannetons and put them in the refrigerator after they have bulk fermented, and I will just use them through the week as I need them. I also do other things through the week with my sourdough and sourdough discard as needed if I feel like I want to make a different sourdough recipe. And then obviously I take my discard and put it in other recipes and use it in different things. I also take the time on these Monday resets to go through the refrigerator and pull out any food from the week prior and get that into a big bowl and take it out to my chickens and kind of just go through the pantry and see what needs to be moved around in there and cleaned up, and kind of just go through everything in my kitchen and decide what I need to prep for the week. And for those of you who are interested in my sourdough recipe, I use 125 grams of sourdough starter. I use 375 grams of water and 500 grams of flour, and that's just enough for 1 sourdough loaf, and I doubled this recipe so that I could make 2. This is also not the scale I usually use. I usually use my bigger one. This is my little coffee scale, but my big scale needs a new battery, so I need to order some of those, but you know how that goes. And then I also, for my dough, after I let it sit for about 20 or 30 minutes, I add in 15 grams of salt. And so I'm doubling it here and adding in 30 grams of salt. I mix my salt in some warm water so it can start to dissolve a little bit before I add it to the bread. As I'm working through my kitchen, I look to see things that need to be filled up, and you can see that my flour is empty, so I take the time to fill my flour container up, and whatever I use that is low, if I have extras, I have a bin in my pantry that kind of holds some of my extra baking things. I'll fill them up as needed as I go along. I also try to clean up as I go and wipe everything down as I go as well. I am also on the market for a flour mill. As you can see, I have the Nutri-Mill flour mill here, but I do not like this one because it's cumbersome to use. I have to take this big plastic thing in and out of it. I'm actually looking at a different Nutri-Mill right now that I might be getting for Christmas. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet, but I kind of like the idea of the one that just sits on the counter and you don't have to clean it out every time you use it. That one I actually have to clean out, and I just want to be able to put the flour that I need in it and mill it as I need it and just have it on my counter for easier use. The other one is a lot bigger. So Here I just take the time to unload and reload the dishwasher and run it so that my sink is clean and I have a clean slate for all the other projects that I plan on doing in the kitchen. I am a big fan of the Food Nanny, and I do use her kamut flour, and I'm also a big fan of putting your kitchen to bed every night, but that doesn't always happen around here. I do try to always do that if I can, but you know, sometimes as a family of 5, that doesn't always happen after I cook dinner. Sometimes things are happening or going on, or I'm just tired. So this morning I did wake up and did not have the gift of a clean kitchen after the busy weekend. So I just took the time to wash up all the big items and take care of my cast iron, put them all back up where I have them hanging on the side of my wall, and just kind of get everything cleaned up. But typically I usually wake up in the morning and most of these things are done and clean. So I sometimes will put my kombucha bottles in the dishwasher, but I did not have them in there this time, so I just hand washed them because I need to remake my kombucha. I have it where I remake it either on Sunday or Monday. I also try to wipe everything down on Monday. I mean, I think we all do this multiple times throughout the week, but definitely on Monday when I'm having the reset, everyone's at work and school, I just try to go through and kind of reset everything, wipe everything down, clean everything up, and try to make sure that I have everything cleaned up and ready for the rest of the week. So now I'm getting started on the kombucha, and I'm getting some water on to boil so that I can make my sweet tea component of my kombucha. I have all boys, and I don't know about you, but the way my house is set up, sometimes their stuff ends up on the end of my island there in that corner, and that's their favorite spot to just like put their stuff. I don't know why it's like this, but it always is, and I always find myself telling them to come get their stuff off of my island because this is where I cook and clean. Now, some of that is medicine. I did have one of my boys was sick this last week. He's doing better now, but some of that was just all of the things that I was using to help treat him while he was not feeling well, and it's just easier to leave all of that sitting out so that he can get to it and take what he needed when he needed it. It also amazes me in one day how dirty the floors can get when you have animals. We have cats and just people living in the house, walking around, doing things. Oh, there's just always so much dust and dirt, just stuff to clean all the time. So here I am starting the sweet tea of my kombucha. I add 1 cup of sugar to a mason jar, and then I add the hot water to the sugar, stir it to dissolve that, and then I add a tea bag and I let that steep for at least 15 to 20 minutes, and also kind of let that cool down before I add it to the main kombucha. That way I don't mess up the SCOBY. So now that my bread has sat for about 20 minutes, it's time for me to add the salt. So I just kind of stir this around with my finger and try to get all the salt out of that little container and mix in the salt as best as I can. And while I add the salt, I actually do the first stretch and fold on my sourdough bread. I'm never super precise on my stretch and folds for my bread. I just stay busy in my kitchen when I'm making bread, so I just come to it and stretch and fold it when I think about it. Sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, and sometimes it's even a little bit longer than that, but I just try to get 4 good stretch and folds in, and also really look at my bread dough and see that it looks the way that I want it to before I do the first bulk ferment. So now I'm adding my stevia powder to all of my jars for my kombucha. This is what I like to use. You can use what you like if you decide to make kombucha. I do have a full video dedicated to my kombucha if you're curious as to what kombucha is and how you make it, but I do like to drink 1 kombucha every single day for my gut health. So I also like to add fruit to my kombucha, but you don't have to do that. You can just drink the kombucha as is with the sweetener and the kombucha, but I sometimes will add raspberries, strawberries, or blueberries, or a mixture of all. Sometimes I'll buy the triple berry and add that, but I add that after I add the sugar, and then I pour my kombucha liquid over that. So here I'm just making that sweet tea component that I told you about with the sugar and the hot water, and then I'm just going to add my tea bag and let that steep. And then I'm going to take my frozen blueberries, and I needed to use these up, and I had the perfect amount in this little blueberry bag, so I just put these blueberries into the bottom, probably about 6 or 7 blueberries per jar. And then I filled them up with my kombucha liquid. This is the easiest way I've found to do this. I have a 2-cup measuring cup with a spout, and I just poured 2 cups into it, and then that perfectly fills my kombucha bottle up, and I just fill them up with that. And I even leave this goby in my 1.5 gallon jar, as you could see in the back behind me, and this process goes pretty quickly. I just make sure I have these filled all the way up to the top, and then I put the lids on as tight as I can and set them on the counter. And I even leave them to ferment on the counter a little bit longer. Sometimes I stick them in the refrigerator. It just depends on how I'm feeling, if I get to them, if I think about it. We're just doing our best over here. So now it's time for the good old stretch and fold again, and it's hard to see because I did not give you a close-up zoom in shot of my dough, but you can see that it's getting really stretchy. It's starting to change in its texture. It's not shaggy anymore, and I just go around the bowl 4 or 5 times, stretch and fold, and then cover it back up until I think about stretching and folding the dough again. So now I realize that my sourdough discard jar is full all the way to the brim, and I need to use it up. So I am going to make some sourdough crackers. I try not to make these too often because I could just sit and eat them all and not even think about it. And then before I know it, I've eaten 2 trays of crackers. They're so addicting. They're so good. But I just take a stick and a little bit of some butter because that's what I had on hand. And then to the butter, I just mix in about 2 cups of discard, and I just mix that together really well until it's well combined. It doesn't seem like it's going to mix at first, and you just keep stirring it, and eventually it does stir together. But I stir those 2 things together, and then I take my little angled spatula. I use this thing all the time in my kitchen, and I just get this mixture as thin as I can on my cookie sheets, and with the butter in there, with the sourdough starter, these crackers are so good. Everyone in my family loves these. Everyone in my family does not love sourdough discard. Like, I've made like sourdough flatbreads with just the discard, and they just think it's nasty. But if I make these crackers, which is pretty much the same thing, they love them and they eat them. So I do go ahead and make 2 trays of these, and I put them in an airtight container, and they last for a good long while. You know, I don't sit and eat them all. So you can make these crackers savory, you can make them sweet. It's probably a little harder to make them sweet because this is like sourdough discard, so it is very sour tasting. But these are good with salt on them. These are good with everything but the bagel seasoning is one of my favorites to put on them. You can make a mixture of different spices of whatever you like garlic powder, onion powder, or whatever you would like on a cracker. You could mix in, different types of thyme and oregano or whatever it is that you want, like Italian seasoning. You could put whatever you want in them, but this is like the base of the cracker, and I actually do decide to just leave these plain. I am using my USA pans, and I have found that the sourdough does not stick. Sourdough crackers do not stick to these pans, but if you are using a different type of pan, you may want to put down some parchment paper so that your crackers do not permanently stick to your cookie sheet, because that would be very frustrating. So I just bought these off of Amazon. Ruth Ann Zimmerman makes these crackers, and she stated, this is the only pan that she's found that her sourdough crackers don't stick to. So I went and got some when they were on sale, and I use these pans all the time. So I highly recommend these pans. But here you see I spread this out as thin as I could on the pans, and then I put these in a 375 degree oven. I set the timer for 10 minutes because in 10 minutes I come back and I take my pizza cutter and I score the crackers. You can make them as big or as little as you want, and I just put them back in after I score them. So you'll see me do that here after a while. And then I'm going to finish making up my kombucha so that it can sit and be ready for me on next week. So I know how much water and everything to add to get it up to a certain point on my container. So I don't measure this stuff anymore. I've been doing this for so long that I don't. But if you're new to this, you may want to find like a recipe. Well, like I said in my vlog, I do give you all the measurements there, but I don't follow that anymore because I've done this I make this every week, so I pretty much know exactly how to make it. Usually on this day also, I'll make some granola as well, but we didn't need any granola. We still have a little bit left from the weeks prior, so I will probably make granola the next week. But I keep my kombucha over here by my table. Yes, that's my cat. And I have it on a heating pad, and that has helped my kombucha a lot from having trouble from having mold. So I use that to keep it at the proper temperature as my house got a little bit colder for the weather changing. So here I decided we were out of breadcrumbs, and I had a loaf that did not bake up very well. It was kind of flat and nobody was eating it. So I took it out of the refrigerator and I cut it up and I made breadcrumbs out of it. Now, if I was to do this again, I don't know why I did it this way, but I'm telling you so that you can do better than I did. I would have cubed this bread up and put it in my food processor and processed the bread that way, and then baked the bread processed. Like I would have just baked the breadcrumbs until they were crispy. But I took this and I cut it into little bite-sized pieces and I baked it. And I had a really hard time processing these breadcrumbs after they were like that. Now that would be a good time to like let them be croutons, but we didn't need any croutons. We're not eating a lot of salads right now since it's not summertime anymore and we're not getting all of the fresh greens and things out of the garden. But definitely make this into breadcrumbs and then put it into the oven. It's a whole lot easier, trust me. So here I'm getting out my sourdough crackers after 10 minutes, and I'm taking my pizza cutter and I'm just scoring them. I don't care what shape they're in. I don't have to have them perfect, so I just go through and just do this really fast. And I just make them into like a regular Cheez-It size of a cracker. And then put them back in the oven. I think they took about 30 more minutes, but you want these to just be golden on the tops of the crackers, and if you take them out too soon, they won't be crispy. But when you first take them out, they aren't crispy, but they will crisp up as they cool off. So don't burn your crackers waiting for them to be crispy out of the oven. So then I finish up making my breadcrumbs and just cut this bread up into little pieces and then put it to the side so that it can go in the oven after my crackers are finished. At this point, if you want, you could add some avocado oil, olive oil, or some butter to your breadcrumbs, or you could add some salt and pepper, but I just left mine plain because I didn't know exactly what I was doing with them. Sometimes I use them to put in chicken, like to bread chicken. Sometimes I use them in a meatloaf. So I just left mine plain so that I can season whatever I was making the way that I wanted it without the breadcrumbs having a season to them. So I'm doing my third stretch and fold of my bread here and putting that back aside. And then my crackers are done, so I'm pulling them out of the oven. To be honest, the middles could have gone just a little bit longer, but these did sit on the stove and crisp up just fine. And you want these to cool completely off before you store them in your airtight container. So now I'm putting my little cubes of bread that should have been breadcrumbs into the oven, and those took about, I left the oven the same on the 375, and I believe those took about 15 or 20 minutes. You just want those to be completely crispy and dry. So like I said, I put these in an airtight container and set them on the counter, and they're a great snack to have with cheese or with some little bit of meat. I just come through and sometimes snack on a few of them right before dinner if I'm a little bit hungry, and it'll hold me over. But they are a good, delicious snack, and like I said, my favorite is to put everything but the bagel seasoning on them after I smooth them out on the trays. They are so good. So I tried to use the food processor to turn these into breadcrumbs, and they were so crispy that did not work. So I had to get out my blender, and this worked perfectly. But like I said, if you want to make these into breadcrumbs first, use your food processor, turn them into breadcrumbs, and then you won't have to go through the headache that I went through here. But I just put these in my blender, and they blended up into breadcrumbs really quickly. And I just store these in an airtight container in my pantry, and they last for a really long time. I love knowing that these are healthy sourdough breadcrumbs so that they are good for our gut and our gut health. I love having breadcrumbs on the shelf, easy, ready to go. I didn't used to keep these handy. I used to just buy them at the store, but I love to know that this is fermented, it's sourdough. I know what's in them, and it's very easy to just make these up as needed. And I'm always making sourdough loaves, and they're not always eaten, so I can just collect the pieces and the parts of the bread that isn't eaten and put them in the freezer, and when we need breadcrumbs, I can just make them up as we need. So I've done all the stretch and folds of the bread, and the bread has done its bulk ferment. Now this does look different because it's a half and half with whole grain, and so it's not the same texture as you would see with an all-purpose flour sourdough. So I'm just going to cut this in half, and I'm going to make this into 2 sourdough loaves that I will keep in the refrigerator and just cook them up as needed, or turn them into something else. They're already in there ready to go. Like I said, I've already cooked one of these up, and it is really good. It does not puff up as much and get as big with the freshly milled flour in it, but it's still good. It still tastes good, and the freshly milled flour actually gives it a really nice nutty taste. So the other one, I believe, like I said, I'm going to turn into rolls. I'll just take it out of the Banneton basket and cut it into 8 pieces and let it rise a little bit on the counter after I roll them into rolls, and then we will enjoy them with something that we have this week. So I appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with me today as I go through and reset my kitchen and reset some of our ingredients and some of the things that we use all through the week on this Monday. And if this is something that you do also, please leave it in the comments. How do you reset for your week? How do you reset? Do you take and do this on Monday? What are the things that you like to make for your family and have on the shelf ready for them? What kind of things do you make that wouldn't normally be a convenience item that you turn into a convenience item for your family? I would love to hear from you in the comments. So this is what the dough looks like in the baskets, and I just wrap this up into a plastic bag so that it does not create a crust on the bread, and I just make sure it doesn't stick, and I put these in the refrigerator until I'm ready to use them. I appreciate you stopping by and watching my video. I hope that you will like and subscribe, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Bye.